Streets of New Capenna is shaping up to be a very interesting Magic set, featuring a variety of crime families, some strong and some downright absent.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings! Owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends, I hope the day finds you well, because we have gathered to take a look at a new spoiler for Streets of New Capenna that is here to also spur on a discussion surrounding the presence of the families in New Capenna. If you weren't aware, I have actually been covering the Streets of New Capenna lore as it unfolds over on my other channel, Fantasy Geographic. Just released the 4th installment earlier today. So if you want to know what's going on with the story of Streets of New Capenna, those will be linked at the end of this video so you can go and check them out. Now, I'm going to put the spoiler card up on the screen. We'll talk about the card first, and then I'll talk about what's going on with these absent families, all right? So this is the Riveteer's Charm. This is 1 green, 1 red, and 1 black for an instant that has 3 different options. You get to choose one of them. First option, target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker they control with the highest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. That is a great ability. Who's your most expensive guy? Get rid of him. I like the fact that it's not based on power or toughness, because sometimes your opponent will have out a little 1/1 that has a huge casting cost, and you can basically gank them that way and you don't have to worry about it, where if it cared about power, it would pass right over that 1/1 with a terribly annoying ability. So a lot of the times it feels great to hit the highest casting cost, but at the same time, it does stop you from being able to specifically choose the creature or planeswalker you want to get rid of, right? You can't opt to go creature or planeswalker. Whichever is the most expensive gets ganked by the charm. The second ability is exile the top 3 cards of your library. Until the next end step, you may play those cards. Not too shabby. 3 cards for 3 mana is pretty solid. Yes, obviously, you're limited in the fact that you can only play them for the 1 turn, but still, 3 for 3 mana on 1 card is a solid deal. And then the final ability is exile target player's graveyard. Now, the flavor concept behind this isn't quite as clear, like tied into the colors of the card, as some of the other charms, right? I mean, it does feel pretty similar in that you have the black ability being the sacrifice ability, right? The first ability. The second ability, exiling top cards of your deck and getting to play them, that's clearly very red. Now, where green gets a little bit weird is exiling target player's graveyard, because that actually really does feel like a black ability. Although in more recent times, green has been moving into like pinpoint graveyard removal. So it's a secondary-ish ability in green, but because it's not a primary ability, it does make this particular aspect of the card feel a little weird. But exiling a player's graveyard is an incredibly powerful effect. There's a reason that people love Bojuka Bog, right? You put it into play, boom, your whole graveyard's gone. Your reanimating shenanigans, forget about it. All those resources in your graveyard, gone, right? So this is a good array of options. You can use it to either get rid of a creature or a planeswalker that's a problem. You can use it to get more fuel for yourself, or you can deny your opponent their graveyard. And I guess in the most extreme circumstances, you could actually exile your own graveyard too. I really only would see you doing that in case your opponent's like, hey, I'm going to reanimate your creature from the graveyard. And then you go, what graveyard? But in most cases, you're going to target other people with it. Either way, this feels like a solid set of abilities. In terms of the artwork, on the regular version, you have the Riveter's Charm, which is shown as an anvil with a massive maul that you would use to forge things, right? And it's got this sort of molten red glow to it. I love it. It looks like you are literally just slamming it with a hammer, right? Like it has that fresh from the forge, hasn't been quenched feel, which is great. And I don't know if this is placed on some kind of chest or whatever, right? But the idea behind the charm, at least on the more fancy version, the high-rise version, it looks to be like the first ability is being activated here, because what you can see is the same riveteers, I should say, musketeers, riveteers. All right, so this is their logo, right? But it's done in this golden style. You can see it's on a vault door, but it looks like it's weeping blood, doesn't it? Like at first kind of, and then you go, wait, what is that, poison? And then when you compare the two logos, you're like, wait, does it go like this? Is the charm infused into the like metal or whatever, and it glows like forge metal? And then when you trigger the trap, that all pours down and either poisons or cooks you alive? Like that's the vibe I'm getting off of this vault door version with that whole massive, like, you're trying to rob me? Get ganked. I love the flavor concept of this. And honestly, I was staring at these cards going, this is really cool. And then it dawned on me, I've read every scrap of the new Capenna story, all of it. And I can't tell you very much about the Riveteers at all. They're almost an absent family, it feels like. They get a little bit of a mention here or there. In the first story, we get to hear about how they're basically almost down in the bowels of New Capenna, talking about how all the other families should, like, be aware of them and don't tread on me. We're the ones who build this world, and if you don't respect us, maybe things will start to fall apart on you when you least expect it. Maybe your house will collapse on you. Like, it had that kind of ominous vibe where the Riveteers were all riled up and getting ready to do something. But so far, we've been through 80% of the story, and the Riveteers have made virtually no impact. The same goes for the Obscura and the Brokers, but to lesser degrees because they do seem to have a bit more of a presence. But we have a situation where 3 of the different families are essentially almost irrelevant. This is supposed to be a world where you have 5 crime families that are all kind of somewhat balanced out, and they all have things that matter that they do in New Capenna. But when you actually boil down the story we're being given, it really just turns into the Maestros and the Cabrettis with some Planeswalkers and Phyrexians stirred in for good action. I'm really looking forward to seeing the culmination tomorrow where we get to find out ultimately what's going on with Urabrask and the Phyrexians and all that goodness. But in the meantime, I'm genuinely left going, okay, I feel like I know a bunch about the Maestros and a good chunk about the Cabretti. The Riveteers, to me, are the most overlooked family in the entirety of New Capenna. Now, yes, we do have some more story action coming tomorrow, but I do want to put this out there as well. The main story that they put out today had a lot of story elements that progressed the story, and the previous side stories we read felt like they also added on and somewhat like gave depth to the main story. But I can't really say that for today's side story. Today's side story was like Angelo's daughter getting married the day of my daughter's wedding, sort of. It's not like it was a bad story. It had some fun little like, hey, check it out, use this statue to behead this guy in a clever way. That's fun. Crazy, silly nonsense like that. But ultimately, that particular story felt like it didn't add anything overall to what's going on, and I feel like they're probably going to have the same thing going on tomorrow, where the main story will progress in the main storyline, but the side story is going to give you maybe a bit of a flavor window into the world of Capenna, but not add to the main story. And the problem is today's side story was very much focused, again, on the Maestros. We are not getting Riveteers. We're barely getting Obscura and Brokers. And the Brokers specifically have a doomsday prophecy about New Capenna. We don't know what the prophecy is, and we don't know how they intend to stop the prophecy or any of that, right? And then we've got this whole the font and Ob Nixilis stuff going on. So it feels like there's a ton of loose end story strings that will never get addressed. And basically these families are going to languish in the shadows, unless maybe we come to Capenna again, but I imagine by then there'll have been a complete upheaval and everything will have changed. The city of Capenna may have fallen, and we may be dealing with a larger plane full of Phyrexians. So as somebody who is a massive lore fiend who loves to dive in and chew on all the meat of the stories, I'm really finding myself disappointed by the lack of meat for about 60% of the families. Cabretti and Maestros specifically. The Maestros get the most attention. They're well developed. Xander as their leader is really interesting. He's really clever, and the stuff he does in today's story is fantastic. He's great. You get a bit of Jetmir, you get a bit of Rafine, you get a bit of Falco, and the leader of the Riveteers, I don't even think they say her name. She just basically like, respect us. It's just underwhelming to me. Anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for coming by, my friends. Big shout out to my patrons and links to the glorious lore on the screen.